there, silly geese. Quackers, what's got you all lit up today? Yes, that take has been bouncing around for years and it's still going strong. Fortunately, this is Webfowls, where we take on or dive into the best and worst takes that the internet has to offer. And the Hunger Games as a Battle Royale ripoff is definitely an angle we need to take a look at. Disclaimer. Spoiler alert for the Hunger Games series and Battle Royale. Obviously. Battle Royale is a novel written by Kosun Takami and was published in 1999. I'm going to be focusing on the novel here, not the movie, okay? Because the movie is a very different story and it brings its own distortions into the mix, and I'm not interested in doing that today. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the story through this translation, the Yuji Oniki translation. And I'll be honest with you, it's got a lot of issues. There are errors in the translation. And so if you're thinking about reading it, I would recommend maybe trying the Nathan Collins one. I hear better things about that. Haven't read it myself yet, though, so. Anyway, here's the quick rundown of Battle Royale. Battle Royale takes place in a fascist reimagining of 1990s Japan, where no one is allowed to oppose the government for any reason. And this government runs something called the program, or Battle Experiment Number 68 program. And it is a battle simulation program conducted by the nation's ground defense forces, instituted for security reasons. 50 third-year junior high school classes are selected annually to conduct the program for research purposes. Classmates in each class are forced to fight until only one survivor is left. In the novel, we followed the 3B class of Shiroiwa Junior High School, which has 42 students that were on a school bus going on a school trip when they were gassed, kidnapped, and taken to an island that has been evacuated so that they could conduct this program. The students wake up in a classroom on this abandoned island and meet their new teacher, who is really just the facilitator for the program. His name is Sakamochi Kinpatsu, and he is a sadist who has a lot of problems. And he describes this whole situation as a game. The program is pretty simple, about as simple as it is unhinged. Each student receives a random weapon, and I will keep doing that for reasons that may become clear later. A map, some rations, bread and water, and a silver collar that tracks them and is rigged to explode if they break the rules. Every 6 hours, Sakamochi will do an announcement where he informs the remaining students which students have died in the last 6 hours, and he also announces the forbidden locations, the forbidden areas for the next 6 hours. Every 2-ish hours, a new place becomes forbidden, and if you happen to be in a forbidden zone after it becomes forbidden, your collar detonates. Or if there have been no deaths in the last 24 hours, then all the collars for the remaining students detonate. So they're totally fine with there being no winners. The narrative shifts across the perspective of various students over the course of its 600 pages, but it mainly follows Shuya Nanahara, Noriko Nakagawa, and Shogo Kawada, who all band together to survive the program. Shuya is the main protagonist here, and he is a popular kid. He used to be a baseball player, but now he's a rocker. Noriko has a huge crush on Shuya. I feel like that's most of what we know about her. But Shuya sees her mostly as his best friend girl crush situation. And that's kind of how their dynamic unfolds throughout the story. Noriko actually starts the games with a pretty uncomfortable leg injury because Sakamochi shot her. Shogo is the third of their group, and honestly, maybe the most important. He was a mysterious transfer student until the program started, and then Shuya, the protagonist, finds out that Shogo is a transfer student because he actually won the program the year before. He was forced to participate in a previous class. He had an injury, was held back a year, and somehow, magically, his class got selected again. Their primary antagonist is Kazuo Kiriyama. He is a classmate who suffered a brain injury as a child and can feel no emotions, and so he feels like this program is a sport. He is here to win. Over the course of the program, we see dozens of kids die, and ultimately it comes down to Kazuo, the antagonist, and Shuya, Noriko, and Shogo in a gunfight. Shogo takes out Kazuo. Shogo helps Shuya and Noriko escape. Their plot is discovered, and the government is hunting them down, and the last scene that we have is Shuya and Noriko are trying to escape via train, and a police officer finds them and kind of chases them out of the train station, and we don't know what happens after that. I want to be so clear that that description that I just gave you is broad strokes. We're talking real broad. This is 600 plus pages of text, and we got it down to like, I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes. So we're obviously missing a lot of details. I've included mostly what I think is important for context as we explain why people think that The Hunger Games is a ripoff, okay? If you'd like a more thorough breakdown, I'm totally open to that. Let me know if there's interest. Maybe we can work something out. I'm looking for an excuse to read it in Japanese, okay? Anyway, let's see how The Hunger Games compares. Here in, I don't know, it is currently September 2025. We have 5 Hunger Games novels and 5 movies, I think, with another on the way. That may or may not change, we don't know. But for the purposes of this, we're going to be focusing primarily on the first book, the Hunger Games book, okay? There may be a couple other things that we reference, but mostly we're sticking to the first one. The Hunger Games was written by Suzanne Collins and was published in 2008. It portrays Panem, a post-apocalyptic North America, ruled by the capital. Each year, the 12 districts must each send 2 tributes, a boy and a girl between the ages of 12 and 18, to fight to the death in a televised spectacle called The Hunger Games. Everything about the games is made to be a huge, showy spectacle. It's meant to be entertaining. From the ceremony where the kids are selected to where they die and the announcement of the winner, it's all a big show. They are designed so that people all over the country, both in the capital, where people's kids are immune from this punishment, to the districts, everyone is forced to invest in these games. Of course, the district's people are naturally invested because their friends or family members can be selected. But the capital people, and some of the people in the districts, invest in the game by betting on who they think will win. As for the purpose of the games, they're meant to serve as a punishment for past rebellion, and at least according to Snow, the president of Panem, reminds the people of Panem, both in the districts and in the capital, that humans are beasts that need to be controlled by the government. They need law and order to thrive. Again, that's not really included in the first book, but I think it's worth mentioning. The original trilogy is from the perspective of Katniss Everdeen. She is a 16-year-old girl from the poorest part of the poorest district, and she and her family are only like scraping by a living because she can hunt with a bow and arrow. That gives her access to food resources that most people don't have, and what I need to emphasize here is that people are regularly dying in the streets. In the first book, the one that is most like the Battle Royale, which is why we're focusing on it, Katniss volunteers to take her sister's place when her sister is reaped. And reaped just means selected in the context of this book, or this series. So Katniss becomes the female tribute for District 12. Her male counterpart is Peeta Mellark, a boy whom she owes her life to because when she was 11 years old, she was out in the rain, starving to death, looking through trash to try to bring some food home, and he and his mother see her, and he throws her burnt bread, and it helps sustain her family, and then later she realizes that she can go out into the forest and everything is fine. But she feels like she owes him a debt she can't repay because of him saving her life and the lives of her family members. On the other side of things, Peeta has a huge crush on Katniss and has since they were like 5. So as they go into these games together, he is actively doing everything he can to try to make sure that Katniss gets back to District 12, even if that means him dying. To that end, Peeta joins an alliance with the main protagonist, Cato. Cato is from District 2, one of the career districts, and career districts are the ones that actually train their kids for these games, even though it's technically illegal. They win the most often, and so being part of their group is like a little bit prestigious, but also a little bit of a problem. It's implied that Peeta joins this alliance because he wants to try to protect Katniss where he can. And he does get the opportunity to use his position within the alliance to protect Katniss. When she's trying to escape, he actually fights Cato. During that fight, Cato hits Peeta in his thigh with a sword, and Peeta receives a nearly fatal injury. A little bit later, after some other things happen, the people hosting the games, the game makers, announce that there is a change to the rules, that 2 victors can be crowned if they come from the same district. So, Katniss teams up with Peeta. She finds him and helps treat his injury, only to find out that unless they get some really fancy medicine, he's gonna die. Due to another mechanic of the games, she actually is able to acquire the medicine he needs and is able to treat him. From basically the time that she finds him until they win the games, she pretends to be in love with Peeta to help gain support from sponsors within the capital. They defeat the antagonist, Cato, by basically saving him from being chewed to death. And the game makers announce that they are actually not going to follow through on the rule change, and the 2 tributes that were presented as lovers were then going to have to choose amongst themselves who would live and who would die, because that's good television. But Katniss didn't really go along with that. She pulled out some poisonous berries and was like, let's suicide pact our way out of here then. And the game makers weren't a fan of that either, so they actually did allow for 2 victors. Unfortunately, the government sees this action as a moment of defiance, a challenge to their authority as the capital, and goes on to target them. Again, that summary is also extremely broad strokes. We cut out a lot of characters, a lot of interesting points. We will obviously get into different breakdowns of that because this is the season of the Hunger Games. The main thing that we're going to be doing for the next few months or maybe year plus is focusing on Hunger Games analysis. So don't worry. I have not forgotten Rue, Foxface, any of the other things that we need to cover. We will get around to them. That's just not what we're doing here. This is mostly just so that we can kind of compare what's happening between Battle Royale and the Hunger Games. So bear with me. Rip-off evidence, the eyebrow raisers. There are some pretty obvious points of comparison between the Hunger Games and Battle Royale. Here we won't be doing a blow-by-blow of the similarities. If you're looking for that sort of thing though, I highly recommend taking a look at ListenToKristen's video, Did the Hunger Games Copy Battle Royale? It was really interesting. She lays out at least 20 points of similarity between the Hunger Games and Battle Royale. So if you're on a deep dive and want to know more about how these 2 relate to each other, I highly recommend her video. Here we're going to be focusing on the similarities that definitely caused me to raise my eyebrows. Kids killing kids in a death game. This one is obvious, yep, and this is usually where the claim starts and ends. Here's the support for it. Both present an authoritarian government that hosts a game, a project, program, whatever, where children are forced to kill each other until there's only one person left standing. Those children, the participants, are selected at random, and the winner receives some sort of benefit from the government. Now, when you have them in a bullet point list like this, it looks pretty bad, right? But let's take a closer look, because when you get into the details, it sort of falls apart. The program in Battle Royale is done in private. It is treated sort of like a top secret project almost, except that people are notified when the games begin and when they end, as well as the result. And by results, I mean how many students died of whichever causes. It doesn't get any more specific than that, really. And the winner is typically announced, though with little fanfare. Shuya describes a news report about one of the programs. We have received a report from the Special Defense Forces and the government that the program in Kagawa Prefecture ended yesterday at 3:12 p.m. It has been 3 years since the last program was conducted here. The subject class was 3rd year E class from Zensuji No. 4 Junior High School. The undisclosed location was Shidakajima Island, 4 kilometers away from Tadotsucho. The winner emerged after 3 days, 7 hours, and 43 minutes. Furthermore, with the retrieval of the corpses and autopsies conducted today, the causes of deaths for all 38 students have been determined. 17 from gunshot wounds, 9 from knife or blade wounds, 5 from blunt weapons, and 3 choked to death. And the children's classes, the ones that are selected for the program, are selected randomly, at least as far as we know. As Shuya describes it, each 3rd year junior high school class has about a 1 in 800 chance of being selected. And what we learned from Shogo's experience is that having been in a previous program doesn't automatically exempt you from future programs. I also want to point out, and I cannot emphasize this enough, that 50 classes are selected every year. Assuming that each class is about the size of Shiroiwa's 3B, we're talking like 40 students for every class. That's like 2,000 dead kids a year. Yeah. Can you imagine? Another thing you need to understand about the program is that students are provided with a range of weapons, right? Before they leave the school, they are given a bag with rations and a weapon. The range of weapons is not quite the same as it is in the Hunger Games, because we're talking about things like boomerangs and assault rifles and everything in between, essentially. And the range of weapons definitely affects how the relationships, the interactions between the students plays out, and that's worth noting too. Something I also want to point out is that this takes place in Japan, and in Japan, the kids that you go to junior high school with are often people that you've grown up with, known for a long time. There's not very much moving around, especially not in the 90s. You stay with your homeroom for the whole year, your homeroom class for the whole year, and sometimes for multiple years. That's part of what makes the story so interesting. They have years of experience and knowledge of each other, and that shapes how they perceive each other and how much they trust each other once they have to take each other out. And in Battle Royale, the prize for suffering through the games and having had to kill all of your classmates is a pension, which Shogo describes as not even really being all that much, and a card from the government. Yay. On the complete opposite side of things, everything in the Hunger Games is televised. The reapings, the selection of the children from each district, the lead up to the games, the interviews, the games themselves, every death along the way, basically, and the post-victory interview where the person who wins has to review everything they just went through. It is very much treated like reality television, and that relationship, the publicity, the spectacle of it all very much shapes the way that the communities in the districts and in the capital relate to the games. Every year, each district sends 2 children, a boy and a girl, between the ages of 12 and 18, usually. And the odds of a child being selected, being reaped, is directly influenced by their socioeconomic status. If you are selected and you win, you are exempt from future games. Usually. And this approach to the games means that about 23 children die every year. Usually. The tributes for the Hunger Games are treated a bit like Olympic athletes, except that they have no training. Well, depending on where they're from. What I mean is, they're each treated as a representative of their districts. Everything they wear, preparing for the Hunger Games leading up into it, and often the weapons that they use in the games reflect the district that they're from and the industry that it's known for. And this relationship where the tribute is treated as a representative of their home district makes sense given what happens if they win. Yes, victors do earn rewards for their personal performance, right? They get a luxury home in a victors only neighborhood that sort of cuts them away from the rest of their community. They receive a lot of money through a monthly stipend or salary, not clear on that. And they're also expected to visit the capital regularly for the games, either as a mentor or to perform some other function. And there's certainly a dark side to that, but that's a story for another video. Winning the Hunger Games also benefits your home district. The people of your district receive gifts every month for a full year after you win. Number 2, the injured love interest. There are a few eyebrow-raising similarities on this thread. The protagonist is not interested, at least not consciously, in the person that is presented as their love interest through the story. The love interest sustains a leg injury, and the protagonist must care for the injured person. Let's take a closer look at how this plays out in each story. As I mentioned, Noriko is already injured before the program begins. Shuya takes responsibility for her, but not because he's particularly interested. His best friend, Yoshitoki Kuninobu, who was also killed by Sakamochi, had a huge crush on Noriko, and Shuya takes responsibility for her in honor of his dead friend. Soon after the program begins, Noriko gets very sick, and it's unclear whether it's because her gunshot wound was infected, or whether it's something else. Fortunately, it turns out to just be a cold, because there was no way she was getting medicine. Shoko ends up doing most of the care for Noriko, finding the medicine and applying it and all of that. Shuya is just expected to look after her while she's resting. Shogo ends up doing a lot of the medical care in this situation, as well as committing most of the violence on behalf of their little trio. Shuya does sacrifice himself in a battle against the antagonist, Kazuo, so that Noriko and Shogo can run away. Then we have Katniss' situation. She keeps her distance from Peta until the game makers announce the rule change that will allow both of them to be crowned victors if they are together. She says, "Peta, who's been wounded, is now my ally. Whatever doubts I've had about him dissipate, because if either of us took the other's life now, we'd be pariahs when we return to District 12. Katniss goes and finds Peta. She ends up having to be his healer, a role that she feels entirely unequipped for. And not long after, she discovers that he has blood poisoning, which is fatal. Fortunately, the game makers offer them the opportunity to get the medicine that he needs to survive. They just need one of them to go to the feast, a situation in which all of the remaining tributes are gathered together in hopes that it will cause them to fight. So Katniss risks her life to go and get the medicine that Peta needs. I will say that there are definitely some interesting similarities between the two stories here, and honestly, the combination of them is a bit of a mess of tropes. Injured companions is a common trope in storytelling, but what's interesting is that we see two different iterations of it here. Shuya is serving as sort of a knight to his damsel in distress, and Katniss is actually doing the whole Florence Nightingale thing, or being a battlefield nurse, whichever you prefer. As is often the case when a man is positioned to care for and look after a woman who is weak, for whatever reason, Shuya's feelings for Noriko are presented more as duty than romance. Katniss's position as the healer or the nurse places her in exactly the right position to fall in love with Peta through what is known as the Florence Nightingale effect. This trope usually has the nurse, the caretaker, fall in love with their patient. And now that I think about it, that might be why it's so easy to go along with Peta's expectation that Katniss's feelings are real through the games. I guess that's something to consider, just not really the point right now. Anyway, what we're seeing is different tropes play out, and they have different effects on how the story moves forward, and how we relate to the protagonist. The last major thing I want to point out is the signal between allies. In both stories, we see the protagonists communicate using greenwood fires and birdsong. And this is the one that really surprised me when I saw it in the evidence for plagiarism that I've seen online, because I hadn't really thought about it this way. Here's the deal. Shogo has other characters indicate that they are looking for him and his group using 2 greenwood fires. Once he sees the greenwood fires, he would answer using a bird call. He has like a whistle sort of thing that can make a bird noise, and the ally, the person that's looking for them, could follow the sound of the bird calls back to where they are. That was his system. For the Hunger Games, we have Katniss and Rue, who is her ally for a while. Rue is supposed to go around and light these greenwood fires that would cause a lot of smoke. It is supposed to pull the careers away from their supplies so that Katniss can get rid of the supplies that they have. And then Rue is supposed to use a whistle, the famous whistle that I'm not going to do, in order to communicate that she's safe. Obviously, the way in which they use these 2 signals is different, but I personally found the combination of the 2 pretty compelling. But that might be because I am not a survivalist person. I am not a hunter. I don't spend a lot of time outside, really. I just started camping because my cat likes it. Maybe if I had had more experience, I would know that these are actually pretty common survivalist techniques. Greenwood fires, it's something that indigenous people have used for a long time, and something that the Boy Scouts are taught to use to indicate that they need help. And birdsong has been used as like a covert communication mechanism for a long time as well. Even Harriet Tubman did it. So these techniques, although interestingly paired together, are not something that is unique to these stories. And listen, I'm not saying that these justifications conclusively prove that the Hunger Games didn't copy Battle Royale. For me, the major distinction between these novels is actually the themes and the social commentary they provide. So let's get into that. Canon analysis. Thematic divergence. While there are definitely enough similarities to raise eyebrows, what really makes these novels some of my favorites is that they were created for different audiences, they confront different questions, and they're shaped by entirely different cultures and moments in history. Again, we're not going to hit every beat here. This is not a full breakdown. Anyway, what I do want to point out is that the significant differences between the Hunger Games and Battle Royale can actually be seen in the authoritarian governments and the games or program that they are hosting. Battle Royale presents an alternative history where Japan is leading the Republic of Greater East Asia in the late 1990s. Every action of the Republic of Greater East Asia seems to engender distrust and uncertainty. Whether you're selected for the program or not, if the government catches wind that you are not on board with whatever decisions or programs they're holding, they will eliminate you. An interesting facet of being able to shift through the different perspectives of the students of 3B is that we get to see that several of these students have been impacted by the way that the government just takes out people that are seen to disagree with the government in any way. Shogo's dad is eliminated because he disagrees or he gets upset and angry when he is informed that Shogo is being placed into the program the first time. We see another character, Shinji, who has an uncle who is eliminated through an accident It's clear that the government is not concerned about the damaged or broken communities and families it leaves in its wake. Additionally, local communities know that they can't really trust that they are safe from the government because no one knows which prefectures are going to have classes selected each year. Then, children who went to school and have class together are turned against each other. One of the earliest interactions that we see after the program begins is that a gang member goes to meet up with the gang boss that he implicitly trusts. He is gunned down by that same leader. In another alliance, a girl tries to poison a boy because she doesn't want him to be part of their group, and she accidentally hurts someone else and ends up wiping out her whole alliance. So let's put the program in focus here. This program seems to be designed to dissolve community trust and to eliminate the connections between the winner and their local community. But what this program is doing on a larger scale is it's telling communities that they cannot trust the people around them. No matter how close they are, no matter how innocent or sweet they may seem to be, if you get put on an island and the government tells you that you have to take each other out, they're going to do that. The people around you will do that if that's what they're asked to do. And so the messaging that seems to come from the government in that situation is that there is no one for you to trust. There is no reason to try to build these communities and these networks of support because everyone will turn against you if it comes down to it. Interestingly, we see the program overcome and the strength of the government overcome when people align and absolutely trust each other. It's a pretty interesting message and social commentary that we're seeing in Battle Royale. Now, let's talk about the Hunger Games. We see something completely different happening there. Every district knows that at least one child will be lost every year. And the ritual of the reaping, where the children get selected, is something that everyone is a part of. You are forced to attend or you will get in serious trouble. It's horrific, and it creates what Plutarch refers to as implicit submission, as sort of agreement and trust between the capital and the district citizens. Remember how I pointed out that socioeconomic status directly ties into how likely you are to be reaped, especially for districts where volunteering is not common? Let's talk about how the tesserae system works. Poor families can put their child's name into the bowl to increase their odds of being reaped additional times in exchange for a specific amount of grain and oil for each person in their family, which means that the odds are deliberately stacked against children from poorer families. This dynamic pits poor people against slightly poorer people, turning survival into a form of class warfare and distracting everyone from the real source of their problems, the capital. Once the tributes make it to the capital, district partners are often kind of left clinging to each other. Even if they don't act as teammates, they are the only other person that they know at the games, in the preparation, the workshops or whatever. And on some level, they're sort of incentivized to work together, even if it's just on a superficial level. Because if one wins, then the family of the other also benefits through the district gifts. This structure builds a sense of in-group and out-group, with the kids from your district being the team that you probably root for, and the kids of all the other districts being the opposing team. What this does is it tells the participants and the people outside that the enemy isn't the capital, it's the other districts. Unlike the program that we see in Battle Royale, the Hunger Games is built on a sense of stability and predictability. Everyone knows what's going to happen. It's that sense of warped trust that keeps the institution thriving until it's finally broken. And that violation of trust is ultimately what ends the game and that version of Pen M, but that's a topic for another video. Why do these theme differences matter? Let's be honest, as we sit here in the rise of fascism, We can see the strategies portrayed in both of these novels currently playing out, like at this exact moment. Don't believe me? Let's take a look. In Battle Royale, we see the Republic of Greater East Asia using the inability to trust or hold the government accountable as a tool for keeping people from actually being able to make change. Sound familiar? Then we see Panem using class warfare via the Tesserae system.
I never thought I'd go on TV and beg for children not to be intentionally starved, and that would be controversial.
And in-group, out-group fighting to distract from where the real problems are.
But it's embarrassing to be a liberal now. When you say you're a liberal, I immediately think,
how do we fix this country? How do we come back together?
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less.
What I'm saying is that while we'll never know whether Suzanne Collins watched or read Battle Royale while working on The Hunger Games, we're lucky enough to have two really interesting stories that are cautioning us how to deal with the tools that fascism uses to oppress its people. And that's really important. But there is something that irks me about this entire conversation. Context. We need to talk about context. I know that we live in the age of the internet. I don't go anywhere without my phone. My screen time is obscene, okay? And I think that because we live in this period and we have these experiences, we sort of have forgotten what life was like in the 90s and early 2000s. It was not this. We were not flooded with information the same way we are now. It wasn't as easy to access all of these materials, all of the media. We didn't have Netflix. We didn't have Amazon really like that yet. And when I read these claims that there's no way that she couldn't have known about it, it makes me wonder if we have completely forgotten what the world was like back then and what people could and would have access to. One of the claims that I saw while doing research for this video is that some people seem to think that the reason that Battle Royale was not released in the States right away was because of racism. Battle Royale and The Hunger Games are both death game books. Yes. There is child-on-child violence in both books. The thing is, though, in the Battle Royale, of the 40 students that we see die in Battle Royale, 23 of them are killed by gunshot wound, okay? And this book was published in 1999. Do you know what happened around the same time? The Columbine shooting. Yeah, there was a rise in that sort of violence taking place in schools around the time that book was released. So of course it wasn't really welcome at that time. Do you know how many children were shot in the Hunger Games? 0. None. So the difference between the two is actually because America has a different relationship to guns. Now back to the take. The Hunger Games is a Battle Royale ripoff. That's a foul for me. There are details that are similar, but if you look big picture, these are two very different stories. Battle Royale tells a story about how governments can use mistrust to dissolve a sense of community and therefore resources and support. And The Hunger Games shows that if you build trust in the government, even if it abuses you, people will accept it. It's showing two different approaches to fascism, both that we're seeing currently happen right now. But before we wrap things up, there is one more thing we need to talk about. If we are 100% honest with one another, we know that we cannot prove one way or another whether Suzanne Collins was influenced or inspired or whatever by Battle Royale. We don't have the resources to prove that. She said that she wasn't, and that's really all there is to that. And as normal people, we can't really afford to pull a Quentin Tarantino and go off yelling about how The Hunger Games is a ripoff of Battle Royale. We literally can't afford it. With the rise of AI, we're seeing a lot of people out here on social media claiming that writers are using AI to write their books, that they're stealing from other authors, essentially, right? It is causing some people to be sued when they don't have the money to handle that. Just because you can go online and say whatever it is you're thinking does not mean you're safe to do so. And I wanted to take this moment to point out that it is dangerous to be out here sharing opinions that you cannot back up. So, while we're here, again, just because I care about you, I want to remind you that we are responsible for the claims that we make in public, even if it's online. And in any case, I personally believe that recognizing the value of every piece of art is more important than trying to tear artists down with claims we can't prove. I read this book so that I could talk to all of you about it, and I have to say, it is now one of my favorites. Both Battle Royale and The Hunger Games are invaluable for what they can teach us about the world around us. But let me know what you think. Do you think it's a copy or nah? Quackers?